Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest narrations. In the first story, we have an alien race that finds out the true meaning of the Red Cross. In the second narration, we have a zoo manager who makes a humble request of the human race and is shocked by their response. Anyways, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Red Cross, written by Alex143. Inside the Galactic Assembly Chamber, a previously Injutranian soldier walked towards the podium. He would now testify against humanity if war crimes had been committed following the end of another conflict. Please state your name and division, the Security General asked the soldier. Soldier Inon of the 2nd Colonial Defense Team of Glenee, replied the soldier, trying to stay as professional as possible. I understand that you were a prisoner of war, am I correct? Inquired the Secretary General. Prisoners of war were famously mistreated, as they were not subject to standard galactic requirements of fundamental sentient rights. Instead, it was only required that they be given food, water, and a cell that was at least 4 meters cubed, to minimize the drain on resources needed for the war. Some nations would often forego these rights in order to preserve even more resources and choose to execute all prisoners once the war ended, though their deaths were always reported as accidents. This made any living POWs extremely valuable to political opponents. Yes, sir, you are correct. Very well. Can you please describe your experience as a prisoner of war? The Terran government was not without opposition. Immediately after the Secretary General voiced the question, ears perked up and eyes became more focused on the ex-POW. I was stationed at one of the border systems in the Trenian Empire, a few weeks after the Emperor declared war. The Terran's rapid deployment force used orbital bombardment on every major military installation on the planet before they landed. The division I was in, the 2nd Colonial Defense Team, was pinned down near a canyon. Terrifying blasts of Terran artillery echoed in the night sky. It was a slaughter. Men fell down in useless droves like useless cannon fodder in hopeless battle. Our division commander, realizing all hope was lost, ordered us to lay down arms and surrender. Those who refused were mercilessly cut down as Terran infantry moved ever closer to our position. I've heard of rumors of shocking things the Terran army will do to those who surrender. Stories like humans eating us plant eaters alive in magnificent feasts or torturing other men for fun. I naturally feared the worst. I feared that the good woman of the Empire would be assaulted, cities pillaged, and men executed, and that I could only watch. I was sorely mistaken. A wave of disappointment could be felt throughout the building as humanity's rivals lost what could have been significant political leverage. Inon continued. The Terran soldiers talked into their radio transmitters and asked for my name. Hours later, we were lined up and brought into a ship with a Red Cross on either side. I wondered if this was the place where I'd be tortured with chemicals until I broke, just for their entertainment. When my turn came, I sat on the chair next to me and noticed syringes, scissors, knives, and much more equipment. I began preparing for the worst. The doctor introduced himself to me. To my great surprise, started treating me, an enemy, and administered expensive medication to ensure that I didn't get infected. They even let our medics and doctors go free before they administered vaccines to our populace. We expected the vaccines to be some cruel trick, but we later learned the truth. This seemingly preposterous act left even our colony governor baffled, as no other race had done anything like this before. I was ushered on board a prison transport ship before heading to my new home that I'd be staying in for the next year. Yet still, I saw that Red Cross. Personnel wearing those armbands frequently asked if I had any discontent with my housing. They asked if I was sufficiently fed. The BOW camp gave me more food per serving than the Empire used to provide me within a day. When I expressed discontent with the size of my cell, I was transferred to a larger one only days later. I grew to learn that those Red Crosses were more than just emblems on armbands. They were the Red Cross, a symbol of compassion amongst the Terrans. When a guard beat me half to death, the men wearing the Red Cross heard about it, and the guard was dishonorably discharged. Everything I saw showed me little pieces of what that meant. But the true revelation, however, was the letters. It was there that I found out my family was allowed to send letters to me. I saw images of my sisters going to the beach. I even saw pictures of my newborn that was due a mere month after I was captured. She would be in kindergarten when I saw her with my own eyes for the first time. Once I was a free man, the Terran government even gave me monetary compensation for that beating. They gave me the education I never thought that I would receive as a citizen of the Empire. Nowadays, I look forward to going to the University of Kahar under the fully paid scholarship, thanks to the Terran reforms. The Secretary General grudgingly thanked Anon for sharing his story before Galactic Assembly guards escorted Anon back to the spaceport. Yet another conflict had ended in Terra's favor, and this time the Assembly had unknowingly faced their most potent weapon: compassion. End of story. Story number 2. The Zoo, written by Digital 332006. Senior Observation Technician Takot read the readings thrice, still in disbelief. Sir, you need to come and check this. 4 of the animals in the 621E Zoo have escaped their enclosure. His supervisor lifted his head from his office, not bothering to get up. Dispatch a team, get them back on the continent that they need to be on. No, sir, we don't understand. They've left the planet. His manager slammed his trunk on the desk and stood up. What? Get it on the screen, now! Takot transferred the secondary camera from the observation station to the main display, showing a small metal craft floating in space, heading outside the solar system. What should we do? Asked Takot. Nothing in the manual had ever elaborated about a situation like this. I am not sure, but we can't have them leave. Think of the ratings. The general manager, Lethus, began sweating nervously. Zoo 621E was the bread and butter for the Waverian Corporation. If the species of the zoo began leaving it, people would stop tuning in, and the Waverian would go bankrupt. They had invested a lot of capital in seeding life on the planet, plus the time for it to grow. There is no choice. He looked over to one of his staff members. Prepare my shuttle. I'll go try and raise it with them. Emily Richards looked over at the sensor readings, checking for any change. There'd been a small spike in energy readings a few minutes ago, and she couldn't pinpoint it. Looking around outside the spaceship, she saw nothing. She decided to try something else, an active sonar ping. It was a long shot for sure, but if there was something there and it was invisible due to light refraction, the physical aspects of it would reply back with an echo. She hit the button. The specifically modified for space use sonar sent out its vibrations, using the tiny molecules of rocks, water, and various tiny objects to litter space to create a wave. Reading the sensors which were translating that information into something usable, she gasped. There was a large empty spot right next to their ship, merely a few kilometers away. She waited for a few minutes, the ship moving, before trying again to confirm the results. The empty space had followed them. Keeping the same relative distance, she hurried to the captain with the news. Lethus watched with curiosity the alien ship, keeping a safe distance. How they created a spacefaring ship so quickly astonished him. It's true that the actual time was different when they observed 621E from their home planet in the Carina constellation, but to think that they'd have spaceships while the camera still had them fiddling with rocks and fire. The strange ship stopped, and so did Lethus, wondering what they were doing now. They weren't yet outside the solar system, so he had no legal authority to do anything. He was trying to think of a way to get them to go back, but had trouble thinking of something that would work. The stopped ship began shining its lights in his direction, and he moved to the other side to avoid them. Strangely, the ship rotated and kept shining lights at him, the frequency changing every so often. Had they found him, his ship's cloak should have made him invisible to them. This time he backed away a bit, and was surprised when the alien ship closed the gap, keeping the same relative distance as before. He sighed, knowing that we would now have to make contact with them, but not knowing how to proceed. Gently, he maneuvered his ship towards them as he deactivated his cloak. He positioned his airlock with what looked like the alien's one and proceeded to dock. He did ponder what species finally managed to get ahead technologically. Was it the dolphins? Perhaps it was the elephants. That would have made him happy. When the doors opened, he was quite startled to see the apes. The next few days flew by rather fast, with the apes working to teach him their language. They had not been shocked as he would have thought them of his appearance, which he appreciated. The crash course in English had been well designed, however, having him able to string along short sentences soon after. They asked many questions, which he tried to answer with his rudimentary grasp of what they called English. As soon as he felt he could express his thoughts well enough, he tried to reason with them. "You must go back. I'm in danger of losing my job. If my bosses will have my head, please help me out here," he said, folding his hands together, pleading. The humans, or so they called themselves, took a moment to confer with each other. They seemed to be much more serious when they previously dealt with him and returned to talk after a few moments. "We understand. We go back. We help." They said that, and he nearly cried of joy and thanked them profusely, getting back on his ship. Lether's shoulders slumped. A heavy weight lifted from them. All that was left to do was write a report and try put in some filler material or rerun an episode when this moment in time would be live. Something his successor would do eventually. For 18 years, everything went splendidly. Ratings were high and life was good for Lethus. Only 2 more years and he would finally retire. He sat in his chair looking at the current diffusion. Some large part triangle structures were being built by an ape-like species. He chuckled, remembering the previous encounter and how he'd handled it. "Boss, come here! Right now!" screamed a new senior observation technician, Tarkot having retired a few years ago. Lethus strolled over to the small office and the technician to see what was going wrong. On the screen was Zoo 621E, and his heart dropped in the pit of his stomach. Zooming out, he saw that he must have been a full armada, hundreds upon hundreds of ships leaving the planet's orbit. "They're also broadcasting a message. Let me put it up," added the technician. "Do not fear any longer, Lethasians. Humanity answers your call. We have come to help." End of story. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Futic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athelia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.